This episode of the GPS DairyCAST is proudly sponsored by Hickman Animal Nutrition and Health. Amino acids don't just boost milk protein, they support better health, reproduction, and profitability. Visit Hickman.com/dairy to improve income over feed costs today.
The GPS DairyCAST features the high-value insights of the GPS Dairy Consulting team's trusted advisors and the owners and managers from the elite dairy farms they serve. These conversations deliver on the GPS Dairy Consulting promise to inspire change and grow leaders.
Hello and welcome to the GPS DairyCAST. I'm Peggy Coffeen from the Up-Level Dairy Podcast, serving as your host. And on this GPS DairyCAST, we are coming to you from the 2024 GPS Leaders Forum. And joining me for this episode is GPS team member King Hickman, as well as one of today's featured speakers, Dr. Barry Bradford from Michigan State University. You are going to hear the summary from his conversation today on mining dry period data for insights into improved lactation performance. Specifically, hear about his findings related to shortening a dry period to 35 to 45 days and what that could mean for the economic benefits for dairy producers. Enjoy this conversation here on the GPS DairyCAST. Modern dairy cow diets demand precision with amino acids at the core. Lysine and methionine aren't just essential for milk and milk protein production, they play key roles in cow health, reproduction, and long-term profitability. Backed by 35 years of expertise in rumen-protected technologies, Hickman's Lysogem Extend and Kescent ME deliver the latest in rumen-protected lysine and methionine to support precise diet formulation, improve ROI, and boost overall cow performance. Learn more at Hickman.com/dairy.
Barry, thanks for joining us here.
You bet.
It was a great presentation that you gave. Maybe give us just a high-level view of your presentation today at the Leaders Forum, how you came about doing it, and what it all entailed.
Yeah. Well, I was at a meeting probably 7 or 8 years ago now and saw somebody pull data from a commercial farm and just plotted out dry period length on the x-axis and subsequent milk yield on the y-axis and said, look, if we screw up and miss cows at dry off, look at the problems we're causing. These cows don't make as much milk. And to be honest, as a scientist, I just kind of got angry with that because I'm like, that's pretty bad over-interpretation. And the reason I focus a lot on transition cows, and we study inflammation transition cows, and the first thing that comes to my head is a lot of those cows with shorter dry periods had shorter dry periods because they calved a week early.
Okay.
Or maybe more. And what drives cows to calve early? Well, inflammation, stress. The cow's like, something's not going right here. I need to end this pregnancy as fast as possible. So what do you think happens with those cows? They're not as productive. They're not healthy already. And so then if you do an association like that, you're going to find that for sure. And it doesn't necessarily mean anything about when they were dried off. So I was annoyed enough by that, it stuck in my head.
Sure.
And a couple of years later, I had a PhD student that really wanted to get into deep analytics for her PhD, Katie Oligari Meyer now, and a fantastic student. And so we took on the challenge of pulling in about 32,000 lactations from, I think, 16 commercial herds, and then went back and looked at performance of cows that were dried off on time, early or late, and then that calved on time, early or late. Okay. So that we could split out whether cows had a short or long dry period based on management reasons or biology.
So before we get into that,
Yeah.
let's talk just a little bit about the herd management software programs.
Yeah.
And what their standard or what their default days dry is.
Oh, this is a good point. So, and
Or
I
gestation
haven't checked on
length.
this super recently, so
Yeah.
I apologize to the people out there if they fixed this. But at least a few years ago, I think, the major software, PC Dart, Dairy Comp, generally still had a 283-day gestation in for Holsteins. And ours wouldn't be the only data set to verify this. Other people have showed this too. But what we found is for a multiparous cow coming back for calving number 2 or later, she averaged 278 days, I believe,
I think so.
278, 279, and heifers were more like 277. So We learned that earlier because we do transition cow studies, and we notice over time that most of our cows are calving early, and it's screwing up our experiments.
Right.
So we adjusted to that. But then this 32,000 cow data set sort of verified that.
Okay, yeah. And I think even now there may be some differences in beef calves versus.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, so
Yep.
a lot of that to take into account too. So distinction between short dry period or short gestation
Right.
or long dry period. What'd you find?
So the basic takeaways is that we found two groups that were problematic in terms of milk production and stayability, if you will, after that dry period. So we really found very little evidence of problems with a late dry off. In other words, a management related short dry period didn't seem to be a problem within the confines. We didn't have any below, say, 30 days.
Okay.
But what we did find is that the short gestation animals had the least whole lactation milk yield of any of the groups. And they also had the highest culling rate in the first 60 days post-calving.
Okay.
So kind of fits with that concept of this is a group that's not healthy already coming into
Right.
calving. They're probably going to stay on that track, or they're a high-risk group at a minimum. By the way, one of the biggest drivers of very early calving is twins.
Okay.
And we did separately account for that. So this is not just showing that twinning's risky. We accounted for that, and this is still a problem.
Okay.
Right? The other group that really stood out, mostly for its poor stayability, was the cows with a long dry period. And this is mostly a management issue. And we looked at some other metrics there. One thing that really stuck out, this is a group that had a really high fat to protein ratio in very early lactation.
Okay.
Which
Yeah.
is a good marker of ketosis and fatty liver type scenario, right?
Yep, yep.
So that all the data on that group fit with this is essentially fat cow syndrome, and whether they got culled in early lactation or not, they probably had poor reproductive performance, and they left the herd at about a 25% greater clip than the other groups
Okay.
over that lactation.
So what was considered a long dry period?
Yeah, so it's a little bit complicated. We divided things up within a herd because we didn't want it to end up being a herd versus herd comparison.
Right.
So within a herd, they had more than one standard deviation from the mean. So then we plotted it out. On average, those cows were at like 70, 75, but there was a fairly wide distribution. So maybe an extra 2 weeks on average.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not
Crazy.
not exceedingly
Not 200
long,
days, yeah.
but
No.
they still had issues.
Yes.
So you would then expect an even longer dry period.
Would be even worse.
It would be even worse.
Yes,
Right.
I think so.
Yeah.
Or at least you have to manage her nutrition very carefully.
Yeah. And we've seen a lot of those because of the avian influenza that went through herds. We have seen a lot of cows that dropped so far in milk, it was sell them or dry them off. And some dairy producers chose to take the risk to dry them off, maybe at 170 days carried calf or 180, 190, and then, yeah. then
Okay.
They got exceedingly long. And I'm quite certain if we did the analysis on them, there
It's probably a bad decision.
not much longevity in the herd after that, yeah.
Especially for coal prices. If
Right.
you can get $2,000 out of her, then
Yeah,
probably would cash her in.
good point. So then what you saw in a shorter dry period that was not affected by a short or caused by a shortened gestation,
Right.
just a shorter dry period, those cows didn't have a lot of problems. They did okay?
Yeah, in terms of, particularly if they had a normal gestation length,
Okay.
we saw no difference in milk yield, no difference in stayability or risk of being culled. And so then it comes down to, okay, well, it doesn't look like this is a huge problem. What are the economic implications or other implications of making a shift? And that's where I turned to some randomized studies, which gives probably the best evidence. So there's been a whole series of studies done in the Netherlands, and also one series of studies done in Canada that collectively say, okay, if we have a somewhat shorter dry period, we probably give up a little bit of peak milk. They've even done studies going to no dry period, and then we lose a lot of peak, and the net impact on milk yield is too drastic, in my opinion. It just doesn't make sense economically. But when I look at the 30-day dry period data, particularly the data out of Canada, they showed on a 365-day-a-year basis, if you consider the extra milk from milking for another month, roughly. In late lactation, it more than compensates for the lost peak. And the benefit in my mind there, that is backed up by some data, is by putting less pressure metabolically on cows in the first month of lactation, we seem to decrease disease incidence.
Okay.
And in fact, the Canadian study showed that older cows on that protocol went from about a 40% cull rate to a 30% cull rate, which has major economic implications as well.
Yeah.
So in that study, they showed more milk revenue and also, less culling. So pretty good basis to consider making that shift, in my opinion.
Making a shift to a shorter dry period.
Yeah.
Did you look at first lactation, second lactation versus older cows? In other words, that heifer coming around for the next lactation, was there did you see anything there?
We did look at that in our retrospective study, and there were certainly parity was a factor in a lot of our models. Obviously, older cows at greater risk to leave the herd, things like that. But we didn't really see any strong evidence that practice A was better for younger cows, practice B was better.
Okay, right.
One thing that did show up when we split things out into some of those complicated things was the cows that were making the absolute most milk at dry off. You hear some people talk about trying to dry them later to let their milk yield go down, and intuitively that has made sense to me, but actually our data showed maybe the opposite. So cows making the most milk, if they had a shorter dry period, they had more somatic cells at an early lactation, and maybe showed a little poorer performance relative to their genetic excellence, right? So if anything, if you wanted to do sort of nuanced individual cow management, the two things that popped into my head from our data was cows with really high milk yield, maybe they actually need that 60-day involution, maybe because there's just more mammary tissue to tear down and rebuild.
Right.
The other thing that stuck out to me is if you really have a herd with tons of transition problems, like tied to fat cow syndrome and stuff, or a subset of cows that that's coming, like they had bird flu or something,
Right.
that's where the Dutch data on the 0-day dry period actually looks appealing, because it really seems on fat cows, they've shown those cows, you really resolve the health problems in early lactation, I guess again because milk yield rises very slowly.
Sure.
And they actually don't lose any milk, because by preventing health problems, probably they're able to do just as well as they would have.
So I just want to play that back. So we can shoot for a shorter dry period, say 35 to 45 days.
Yeah, something like
somewhere in there. We may not see peak milk come as quickly.
that. Yep.
They're gonna come up a little more slowly, maybe avoid some early transition issues because of that, and still end up with the milk at the end of the lactation.
That's my basic pitch.
Okay, yeah. So the other thing that I see when we shorten the dry period, we keep the cows in the barn longer. So you have to have some room in the barn.
Yes.
You can't just arbitrarily make this decision to shorten your dry period and then where are we going to put these cows for the next 30 days?
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Absolutely. And I'd say me trying to push this out in the industry is pretty new.
Yeah.
And so I'm anticipating these conversations, and
Yeah.
I know it's not easy. There are some older facilities that I think I'm definitely on a lot of farms where the dry cows are just in the last 2 or 3 pens at the end of this barn.
Right.
Could 1 or 2 of those pens switch over? Yeah. But there's other facilities, and the most extreme might be multi-site dairies now that have a totally separate site for dry cows.
Right.
It may be very hard to change
Yeah.
practices there, right? But the other thing that I would tell some farms is, frankly, I think you're overstocked already. So
Right.
you could reduce your numbers and milk cows a little longer, and I think from an economic standpoint be way ahead
Way ahead,
financially.
sure.
But that's a long conversation to work through why I believe that.
Yes. Yep.
Delivering amino acids where the cow needs them most makes all the difference. That's why Hickman developed Lysogem Extend and Kescent ME, highly concentrated bioavailable lysine and methionine, protected by a proprietary encapsulation process that ensures release in the small intestine, where they can be absorbed and utilized. Backed by over 35 years of expertise in rumen-protected technologies, Hickman helps improve income over feed costs and overall herd performance. Visit kemin.com/dairy to see how precision delivery drives profitability.
So as we look at this concept, and we had to pick the herd that it would best fit,
Yeah.
or the operation, maybe it's facility or whatever, what would that dairy look like that would be the prime candidate for a shortened dry period?
Honestly, what comes into my head would be, I know some outstanding managers of 400 or 500 cow herds that probably have the ambition and the capacity to grow the business, but they're constrained by capital or land or whatever. I think those are people that, have a smooth running engine. They know how to manage that facility.
Yeah.
They have some capacity to tweak things, right? And
Yep.
so this is a way where they're not necessarily winning on economies of scale like some of their competitors are, but they can sort of take their management to the next level and
Right.
say, try to do these things to capture that 4 or 5% potential benefit. So I guess that's probably, to me, the most likely people to take this and run with it and see if they can make
Okay.
it work.
Perfect.
Yep.
So I'm going to switch gears, give you a chance to brag a little bit, but there's some exciting things going on at Michigan State University with the dairy program.
They are.
A new dairy, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we were fortunate to get the support of the state of Michigan to put some millions behind building a new dairy facility on campus. And we were lucky there that at the land grant that was given for the university 150 years ago, is basically that land has stayed intact. So we have 10 square miles, and half of that footprint is still ag research facilities. And we do everything from fruit crops to
Sure.
row crops to livestock. But we've been able to start a project there with a $75 million new dairy facility, and we're about a third built, and we're hoping to
Okay.
move cows in by early fall of 2025.
Awesome.
It's going to be exciting. So we should be milking, when we're all said and done, somewhere between 550 and 600 cows there.
Different
And-
milking styles, I would imagine. Some robots, some conventional farmer,
Right.
some.
Yep, we'll have two robots, and we really thought of that as a student-oriented area where we're training students how
Yeah.
to manage in that kind of scenario. But we didn't want to go completely robotic because for a lot of our research, we'd like to have fixed milking interval times and
Sure.
just to control more factors, right?
Sure.
So most of our cows will go through a double 12 parallel parlor.
Any disruptions in your research as you've gone through the old dairy to the new dairy and the?
We were fortunate that we've been able to leave our existing infrastructure
Okay.
completely in place. But as soon as the new facility's up, they're going to be prodding us with an electric prod to get our cows moved, because then the team has to demolish the current site, and that's
Okay.
where our new silage pad is going to go.
Oh, okay.
The disruption will be short, relatively. During the changeover, we'll have to stop, but pretty fortunate.
So as far as your lab, what other projects have you got in the works for us? What are we going to learn from you?
Yeah, so one thing that's been fun is when I moved to Michigan State, I stepped into a chair role in dairy management. And so I've had a growing interest in dairy management the last 15 years, but with that title, I felt like it was part of my job
Fair
to
game.
take on. And this project with just dry period length and is sort of aligns with that. But we've been doing some stuff more in economics, and one study we'll be sharing soon. We set up a modeling exercise to say if you're a 250 cow dairy, frankly, in that situation, very few dairies of that scale can afford to reinvest in infrastructure. When you do that, the economics just don't work. So we're setting up a tool and a model to say, using stochastic simulation, it's called, where you sample from an uncertain distribution of, say, what are interest rates going to be,
Okay.
what are labor costs going to be, all these factors that influence the economics of a farm. Given the range of possible outcomes that we might run into, what's the most likely business model that's going to be profitable? And so we modeled just expanding land and cows. We modeled shifting to robotic milking. We modeled just expanding cows and not buying any more land and partnering with neighbors, and asked in the current scenario what looks like the best model. And then we're going to have a tool that people can use for their own situation. So I'm pretty excited about
Yeah,
that.
that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so as I've heard you talk about shortened dry periods, and I go back through my career, which is 36 years now, a good 25 of it doing nutrition work and management consulting, and We've always said 52 to 60 days was the sweet spot.
Yep.
You know, don't go over 60. We always kind of knew that. Just arbitrarily, I've always said it's okay to dry them up early if you need to. Just, you know, give them at least a 42-day dry period. Just mainly just to sound smart, like I had a reason for that, but it was an arbitrary decision. So, you know, now that this is, for me, this is almost verification that I wasn't giving a bad recommendation.
Yeah, right.
Maybe by luck, but so I'm excited to see that data, because I think there are a lot of instances where it makes sense to dry up early. If you need to keep the barn fuller, you had a high cull rate for a little while and you got empty stalls, you want to keep them full, that's a good way to do it. And I think a lot of second lactation animals coming around, we know they're persistent, let's keep milking them a little bit longer, gain that milk at the end of lactation. And then maybe it takes a little pressure off them up front on the next lactation, which also makes sense to me. And that's part of it that I hadn't even considered. Was what's happening at the beginning of the next lactation as a result of that early dry. So
the other place that fits in really nice, I think, and I'm curious your feedback on this, is then you can, well, a lot of farms have already gone to a one group dry cow TMR, right? And the problem with that, the trade-off there is typically we're doing some kind of anionic diet or something with pretty expensive components of the diet, and so that's really what's kept a lot of farms on a two group dry cow strategy, and this could, you know, make a lot more sense for more farms.
Yeah, they won't have to have a month for an exceedingly long time. Yeah, I could see that as one of the reasons too.
I'm also excited, part of what I'm trying to do at Michigan State, because my job is half research, half extension, I think there's a lot of potential as the average dairy gets bigger, more and more sophisticated. I mean, I talk sometimes about when extension was invented, the average farmer had, 6th or 8th grade education? And now I know multiple people with PhDs managing farms, and it doesn't matter if you don't have a PhD, they're very intelligent, very well-educated people.
And the extensionists maybe back then had a bachelor's degree
too,
right?
Right. So I think where we can have more impact today with these super well-managed farms is teaming up with people to help them do their own research. Not that we necessarily want to follow them, but if you look at the poultry and the swine industries or the beef feedlot industries, most of those big integrated businesses now have full-time researchers. They're just asking questions, and they'll pick up the tiniest little tweaks to raising a baby chick to make it 0.1% more efficient, and they can actually prove that it's better. We can't probably get quite to that on dairies, but we can do better at sort of testing ideas. So this is a sort of project where I'm setting up a new program where we're going to pay some graduate students, a couple graduate students at a time, a little bit extra to spend a little bit of time helping to analyze data from either a controlled experiment or just mining data from commercial farms. And so we'll partner with farms, we hope, to dig into some of those questions. And, you know, hopefully we learn some things too at the university as well, but they're getting an answer to a question in their context and their management scheme, so directly relevant to their decisions.
And I think we're going to see more of that on-farm research being done, particularly the multi-site dairies, the ones that have enough cows to do a good enough. I think what's missing there is the person on those dairies that can manage that.
They're all busy already,
trial.
right?
They're busy
so that's
already,
where I think these grad students can benefit from it, but also meet that need.
So that would be a great project. Well, great. Thanks a lot for joining us. I think we gave the audience something to think about, and that's what this is all about, right? Inspire change. So that's what we're out here to do. So I think you're going to do it with that research. So thanks again. And
thanks for the opportunity.
Good luck on the new dairy.
I appreciate it.
All right. Yep.
You just heard from King Hickman and Dr. Barry Bradford from Michigan State University on this GPS DairyCast. I'm your host, Peggy Coffeen from the Uplevel Dairy Podcast, and thanks for listening to the GPS DairyCast.
The GPS DairyCast features conversations that deliver on the GPS Dairy Consulting promise to inspire change and grow leaders. If this GPS DairyCast has you looking for more ways to become an elite dairy producer, find more information in our show notes on how you can add a GPS advisor to your team.
Modern dairy cow diets demand precision with amino acids at the core. Lysine and methionine aren't just essential for milk and milk protein production, they play key roles in cow health, reproduction, and long term profitability. Backed by 35 years of expertise in rumen protected technologies, Kemen's Lysogem Extend and Kescent ME deliver the latest in rumen protected lysine and methionine to support precise diet formulation, improve ROI, and boost overall cow performance. Learn more at kemen.com/dairy.